bad. Hello and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Keir, and joining me today is my good co-host Austin Davidson.
Heyo!
It is season 2, episode 14. It's our first episode since our post-NFL draft recap, so we weren't really sure where to go with this, so we figured it would be a good time to take an early look at the Pittsburgh Steelers schedule since it's been released. Yes, we have already looked at it briefly before, but we're going to take a more in-depth look at it right now. We'll probably do that one more time as the season gets closer, but for the time being, there isn't too much going on around the NFL. First and foremost, Tom Brady was announced to be the cover of Madden 18. Austin, you and I both know that Madden has been infamously known to have a curse surrounding the player that makes the cover every year. Do you believe in this curse?
No. In 2013, Calvin Johnson set a record in receiving yards, and that's enough to tell me otherwise, since obviously he was the cover athlete in 2013. Also, Odell Beckham had a pretty good season following his cover debut in Madden 15. However, I could see how someone could make a case for a curse with Peyton Hillis somehow being a cover player, Rob Gronkowski last year, and Sherman for Madden 2025, where he tore a ligament in his elbow and lost in Super Bowl X-Leagues. But he still made it there, and a few more. What about you? Do you believe in the curse?
No, I don't. I think people go to great lengths to make the curse what it is today. There are some instances, like if you want to go back to Madden 10, where Troy Polamalu missed most of the following season, and like some of the other players you already mentioned before, like Peyton Hillis or even Donovan McNabb, who had an injury-riddled season following his cover debut, or even Sean Alexander. But there are other players like Drew Brees in Madden 11, where the next year he just didn't. Nothing really happened. I think he had like an injury that made him sit out the Pro Bowl, and I saw people pointing to that as like the Madden curse. I really don't think that it's that prevalent. I just think that there are some players, maybe there's a little bit to it, but like I think for it to be a curse, it's got to be something that's pretty consistent. And obviously, if Calvin Johnson is setting a record the year after he's making the cover, it doesn't hold very much weight in my book. So I think it's kind of just something for people to talk about in the long NFL offseason. So moving on, not really anything to talk about here, just a big thing of news here from the NFL today was that Patrick Mahomes, the quarterback selected by the Kansas City Chiefs in the first round, was robbed at gunpoint yesterday. Luckily, he was okay, and according to reports, he wasn't targeted specifically. Him and a few of his friends in Texas were robbed on their way home from a baseball game, so luckily they are all okay. Moving on. On the NFL Network tonight at 9 p.m., players 70 through 61 on the NFL's top 100 players list will be released. Do you pay any attention to this list, and do you believe any of the Steelers will be at these particular positions? We already have one in David DeCastro at, I believe, 97.
Sort of. I kind of look at it when it comes up on Twitter, but I don't really care that much. It's just kind of irrelevant, but I couldn't say I ignore it completely. So I also don't believe any Steelers will make it in this part of the list. No, I don't think we should see Steelers on this list until at probably 40 or 30, where Roethlisberger will come in, and then not again until like 1 through 10 and 10 through 20, where Bell and Brown will come in. What do you think?
I don't really pay attention to this very often. I did a few years ago when they first started doing this, but I found that these lists are pretty inaccurate. And yes, it's pretty tough, but the NFL claims that players voted on this list, and at the same time, many NFL players have come forward saying they've never voted on anything regarding this list and have never heard anything about it. So that alone leads me to find this list to be invalid, and I really think the NFL just makes this list on its own to spark debate and discussion during a long offseason. I find this list to be kind of dumb, as it is every year. I mean, it's okay for something to talk about, but I don't think it really is completely accurate, which I guess that might be unfair to say, I expect them to make a great list, but I really think it's something for people to talk about during the offseason. There's not much going on in the football landscape. I mean, rookie mini camps are getting started, but until training camp gets started, there's kind of a lull. So I figured that's kind of where the NFL was going at this point. So that concludes our NFL news. So now we can move on to Pittsburgh Steelers news. So rookie minicamp, as I said, is underway for the Steelers. Austin, I don't know if, how much you have been able to hear. Luckily, I've been in Pittsburgh visiting my mom the last few days. So I've been able to listen to radio here, and I've learned some interesting things about what's going on in minicamp. Have you learned anything that's a big storyline in your eyes?
I've seen a lot of stories, and there's been a lot of talk about Keon Adams. There's been talks about how he's been putting a lot of work in, comparisons to his coach, Joey Porter, showing potential they may actually be fighting for a roster spot, and that's exciting for me to see a late-round pick actually with potential to make the roster. They've been talking him up quite a bit. It could just be like overly talking him up, but it's still nice to see. How about you? Is there a big storyline that you've been hearing about?
Everyone seems to be talking about the play of cornerbacks Cameron Sutton and Brian Allen, and the fact that James Conner and TJ Watt have made their debuts for the Steelers in camp. But I think the biggest thing to talk about is actually TJ Watt, and not just for him showing up, but it's the fact that the Steelers have reportedly been lining him in at both outside and inside linebacker at times so far. This is very interesting to me and something I don't think any of us were really thinking might happen. If the Steelers decide to play TJ Watt at inside linebacker this season, it's actually not a completely unprecedented move. Believe it or not, Lawrence Timmons was actually drafted as an outside linebacker, but as we all know, saw his playing time as an inside linebacker. And early in his career, he was actually kind of the nickel linebacker that would come in to replace Larry Foote on passing downs, as he would play alongside James Ferrier, and he could blitz or play back and play coverage. And that actually worked out very well for him. And I'm not saying that this is going to mean TJ Watt's going to be an inside linebacker, but it's interesting to think about his ability as someone that if he does play there, it's going to give Watt more reps. He'll be on the field sooner. It's going to improve the depth down the middle, and it gives the Steelers an extra pass rushing element. If you think about it, it gives you James Harrison, Bud Dupree, and TJ Watt all on the field at the same time. I think that's a pretty interesting move to make, and I think it's something that the Steelers are going to be looking forward to. So that concludes our Steelers news. So our big thing today we wanted to get into was the schedule for the Steelers. So we're going to go through every game here, and we're going to talk about our thoughts on the games and why we thought it's going to be a win or a loss. And we're going to have two games that we selected as a lock, meaning we absolutely think the Steelers are going to win this game. But we didn't want to make it too easy, being, we'll pick both the Browns, you know? So we picked one team that's probably not too good that we picked as a lock, and then secondly, we picked a team that's probably pretty good or a team that's at least contending to be our second lock. So keeping that in mind, also remember that this is an early projection of the Steelers' schedule. It's very rare that these actually turn out to be true because a lot of things do happen. There are unforeseen injuries that happen, suspensions, and then teams turn out to be better or worse than we originally thought. So just keep that in mind when we're making this list. So we'll jump right into it, Austin. Week 1, the Pittsburgh Steelers are in Cleveland taking on the Browns. Tell me about what your thoughts on this game are.
Well, welcome back, football. The Steelers walk away with a win in the first game back, as the Browns still aren't a good team yet. Maybe soon they'll be good enough to be a contender, but Myles Garrett, David Njoku, and Jabril Peppers aren't enough yet, so the Steelers walk away with a win. What about you? What do you think?
With every new season comes hope for every team that they can compete and eventually win a Super Bowl. The Browns are going to come into this season with a new sense of confidence and renewed hope that they didn't really have the last, decade plus. But I think that all fades away quickly, at least for 1 week, as I think the Steelers are going to predictably pick apart the Browns in Week 1. The Browns' defense improved in the draft, but I don't think they'll be able to come anywhere close to slowing down Ben Roethlisberger and the offense. I predict that Myles Garrett is going to be blanked with 0 sacks and is going to have relatively no impact. I think Jabril Peppers gets toyed with all game by Roethlisberger, and the secondary is a big victim in this game. I think the Steelers' receivers and playmakers are just too much for the Browns to handle. And on the offense, the Browns are going to have to rely on a strong rushing attack to stay in it. But as the Steelers extend their lead, the Browns are going to have to rely on the play of Cody Kessler and or Deshaun Kaiser, and I don't think that's nearly enough to beat Pittsburgh. So I think the Steelers win big on week 1 and start the season 1-0. Week 2, the Steelers play host to the Minnesota Vikings. What do you think about this one, Austin?
I really dislike this team. It feels like they don't even have anyone that's especially good, like a superstar to represent them. Like the Steelers have Brown or Bell. The Giants have OBJ and so on and so forth. Not that it's necessarily means a team is bad without one, but I feel like it helps to have that one superstar that defines your team. But that being said, I think the Steelers win here against an offense that, in my eyes, failed to improve this offseason, and they were abysmal last year. So what do you think?
Well, it's very interesting how even though the NFL has the shortest regular season of the 4 major sports, it still seemed pretty long as far as how long the regular season went to the Vikings last year. This team was pretty dominant in the first month and a half of last season. They had a strong defense and a solid performance from Sam Bradford as he was playing a game manager's role. The Vikings had, I believe it was a 4 or 5-1 start, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong.
6-0.
6-0. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, they finished 8-8. So as you can tell by that, they came back to earth in a big way. The all-worldly defense that they had in the first month and a half just became an above-average unit, and even that couldn't save the abysmal offenses that struggled in pretty much every aspect, with a lack of playmakers, a weak offensive line, and a struggling quarterback. That position is still a mess, by the way. Sam Bradford is still the starter, and Teddy Bridgewater, nobody knows what's going on with him. He's still recovering from a horrific knee injury where he tore his ACL and dislocated his knee. So there's strong reason to believe he won't be ready. And even if he does come back, there's no reason to believe he'd ever be the same player that he was. But the interesting thing is that the Vikings had 11 draft picks, although none in the first round. They didn't lose too much on their defense, and they added Michael Floyd, the receiver, and Dalvin Cook in the draft at running back. I'm not saying this is going to be a good team at all, but we all know how the Steelers tend to play against average to below average teams. And yes, this is a game at home, which the Steelers don't typically drop at home. But I looked at the rest of the early portion of the Steelers' schedule, and I don't see the Steelers starting 4-0. It's just something they so rarely do under Mike Tomlin. And I think they're going to drop this game in a disappointing fashion, but again, it's early in the year, so you can afford a clunker. So I think the Steelers drop this game and fall to 1-1. Week 3. The Pittsburgh Steelers are in the Windy City taking on the Chicago Bears.
This is going to be my first lock. Chicago lost possibly the only good thing on their team, which was Alshon Jeffrey, and they just look like a team in rebuilding mode, which they are. So, especially with the Mitchell Trubisky fiasco, easy win for Pitt here. Again, it's my lock. What do you think?
This team is bafflingly bad. They are so abysmally awful. I can't even pick them to be the typical bad team that the Steelers lose to on the road. Kind of like where I was hoping, I was going with the Vikings. This team ranked 28th and 24th last season in offense and defense, respectively. They attempted to improve by trading away several draft picks and making only 5 total selections. They did nothing to help their awful defense with 1 pick in the draft in I believe, the 3rd round or 4th round. And then on offense, they created a quarterback controversy with their first pick in Mitchell Trubisky, who I don't even think is that good. And, oh, by the way, good luck to him and Mike Glennon, who don't have an offensive line or any other weapons. As you mentioned, Alshon Jeffrey's gone, and these guys are going to be under siege all season, and God help those poor souls. This seems like a game the Steelers should win by a ton, but I think they will win, but probably not as much as we all hope, but still a good game overall. I think this is a game where the Steelers pick up something like 6 sacks. I have the Steelers improving to 2-1 now. Going into Week 4, the Steelers travel to Baltimore to take on the hated Baltimore Ravens.
Ooh, yeah, Baltimore is always tough regardless of how bad their team is on paper, and going into Baltimore only makes it worse. However, I still believe the Steelers cinch out a win here. I just feel like Baltimore's offense is abysmal at this point, with their number 1 receiver being Mike Wallace. Their tight end, assuming he's not hurt, is Dennis Pitta, and a split backfield between Terrence West and Kenneth Dixon. So while they might have a really good defense, I believe this will be one of the bottom 10 offenses this upcoming year, and to lose this game. What do you think?
Austin, can you repeat the last maybe 10 seconds of what you were saying? The phone garbled what you were saying.
Oh yeah, sure. So while they might have a really good defense, I believe this will be one of the bottom 10 offenses this upcoming year, and it will definitely cause them to lose this game, in my opinion. What do you think?
I completely agree with you, Austin. The Ravens fortified one of the better defenses in the league last season in the draft. And that coupled with the Steelers' common struggles on offense in Baltimore means that I think the Steelers are going to find it pretty difficult to score on offense. What's the good news, though? The Ravens' offense is pretty bad. They didn't really do anything to improve this offseason. They lost Steve Smith Sr. to retirement, and they didn't really add any players in the draft on offense. Their top receiver is Mike Wallace, who is getting older, and they have an injury-prone Dennis Pitta at tight end. Their running backs are Kenneth Dixon and Terrence West. That's not exactly something to fear. But, yes, Joe Flacco is still there, and he typically plays well against Pittsburgh, so you have to be worried about him and, as always, his ability to throw the deep ball. But I don't see how the Ravens are going to score more than 20 points, even at home. They just don't have a talented enough offense, and they have a very weak offensive line. It'll be tough, but I think the Steelers managed to pull out 20 or 24 points, something like that, and eke out a close win in Baltimore for the first time since 14. Is it 2014? Yeah. No. That wasn't right. But in any case, it's been a while. I think that's the point I'm trying to get across. I think it was 2012. But moving on, the Steelers come back home in Week 5 to take on the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Going into Week 5, the Steelers are feeling good, 4-0 in my opinion, and are expecting to wipe the Jaguars. Well, I think the Jaguars handed the Steelers their first loss of the season, and it's been a curse for the Steelers to lose to subpar teams and beat the harder teams in the Mike Tomlin era. I think that the pattern continues here. However, I don't think the Jaguars are as bad as people think. At least on paper, they look beastly, but I said that last year too, and they were really disappointed. However, I think the main problem was Blake Bortles, and I think he returns to his stature 2 years ago, back to being a good quarterback. And this will help the team that already has weapons on both sides of the ball, like Allen Robinson, Allen Hurns, and new running back Leonard Fournette on offense, and Jalen Ramsey, A.J. Boye, and Calais Campbell on the defense. So what do you think about Week 5 against the Jaguars?
Well, the way you talked about it, it seems pretty convincing to me, but I really don't know what to think about this team. On paper, they were supposed to be a pretty good football team last season, but they struggled mightily on both sides of the ball. There's a part of me that thinks Blake Bortles is going to return to the way we saw him play at times a couple years ago, but I think he's heading towards the label of a bust. Whether or not it's his fault, the team really did try to give him some help this offseason, particularly in the form of Leonard Fournette. This guy is a monster when he runs the football, and he's definitely someone that's got me worried as a Steelers fan. I don't know how they're going to deal with stopping him or slowing him down, and that will obviously open it up for the two great receivers on the outside. So I think the Steelers are going to have their work cut out for them, but I still think they pick up a win and cruise to a record of 4-1 because I don't think they'll drop this game to a average/subpar team in Jacksonville because I already had them losing to Minnesota. So I think the Steelers carry a 4-1 record to Kansas City, where they take on the Chiefs in Week 6.
All right. This is actually going to be my second lock. The relationship between the Steelers and Chiefs is very much similar to the Patriots' relationship to the Steelers. In the Kansas City case, the Steelers are the older brother, and I feel like Kansas City can never muster up a win against the Steelers regardless of where it's played. So I give the Steelers a lock here, especially when Kansas City chose to plan for the future instead of now and taking Patrick Mahomes in the first, which I believe to be a huge mistake since they're very close to being in the AFC Championship. But that's on them. What do you think?
Well, I think this is going to be a pretty tough game for the Steelers to win. I thought the Steelers were going to win pretty easily in the playoffs last season, and it actually, as you and I both saw, it was a really tough game. And yes, that was last year, but I think this is the type of game where the Steelers' offense kind of slows down and they don't score touchdowns and get field goals at the end of their drives instead. I don't really have much logic for making this pick, but I feel like in Kansas City. It's always tough to win there. I think a late turnover swings this game in the Chiefs' favor, and the Steelers drop to 4-2. So, next week, the Steelers are playing host to the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, Cincinnati could be better than we think here because let's not forget that their 2016 first-round pick and third-round pick both got season-ending injuries before the start of the season. That would be cornerback William Jackson III and defensive tackle Andrew Billings. However, I still think that only makes them an 8-8 team at best, so I think the Steelers still win here in Pittsburgh. What do you have them doing?
This team added some interesting players in the draft, but they also lost some key players in free agency as well. I suspect this is a pretty close game, but I think the Bengals' run of strong play consistently from 2011 to 2016 is pretty much over. They had some interesting additions like John Ross. You don't really know what he's going to bring to the table, but we know that he's fast, and I think they'll flash some potential in this game, but I don't think they'll be completely ready when they come to Pittsburgh. The Steelers' defense, I predict, is going to struggle with the Bengals' speed and now talented offense, but the Steelers are going to come away with a close win as I have Chris Boswell kicking a game winner with a few minutes left, improving the Steelers to 5-2 overall. The following week, the Steelers play their first primetime game in Week 8 in Detroit against the Lions.
Yeah. Last year, I really think people thought too highly of Detroit. I don't feel like they didn't get much better in the offseason than draft. So I'm going to give Pittsburgh the win here. Until the Lions establish a run game, I don't really think they are a threat because Zach Zinner and Amir Abdullah are just they're not that good. They're not a scary duo in my opinion. What do you think?
I was tempted to have the Steelers dropping a game here to an average team, but I really don't think the Lions did enough to improve as an offensive unit. They were pretty average last year, and they didn't really have any sort of running game whatsoever, which they really haven't since Matt Stafford's been the quarterback. And for those who play defense, it's really easy when you know what the other team is going to do, and that's constantly throw it. On offense, I think the Steelers are going to struggle at first with a good defensive unit, but after making some halftime adjustments, they're going to blow the doors open on this game and win by a healthy margin here, lifting the Steelers to a record of 6-2 at the halfway point of the season. Week 9, the Steelers have a nice, timely bye week, don't you think, Austin?
Yeah, there's not really much to say about it, but I think it's a fantastic time for a bye week just over halfway through the season. What do you think?
I like having a bye later because, as you know, with the stretch runs coming up after weeks 9 and 10, teams really like to have their most important players and are gunning for the not only good health, but are gunning for the home field advantage and number 2 seeds as they want to get those first round byes. Those are pretty important in most cases, so definitely having one later means you can rest up a bit for that stretch run. So the Steelers get a team that they have owned the last 3 seasons in Indianapolis. The Colts... I'm sorry, go ahead, Austin.
No, it's all good. You finish up. Okay.
I was just going to say the Colts have played the Steelers 3 times the last 3 years and have been beaten healthily in all 3 games.
Watching the Steelers versus Colts these past 3 years has not been pretty whatsoever for the Colts, and I don't see the pattern changing here. The Colts didn't really address their offensive line problem in the draft or free agency, and I think the Steelers' improved pass rush will capitalize on that, giving the Steelers a win here. This might be a 4-sack game. Calling it now and early. What do you think?
Barring injury, which, I'm assuming that's the case for all these, this is my first lock pick. The Steelers' offense has been a machine when facing the Colts' defense the last few years, and there isn't any reason to believe that's going to change this year. In the last 3 matchups, Ben Roethlisberger has thrown for 1,107 yards and has dropped in 13 touchdowns. He owns this team, and the offense follows suit. I'd expect more of this after the Steelers have a long bye week to prepare for this game. If I'm the Colts fans, I'm looking away at this game. I think the defense is going to struggle to slow down the Colts this time as they finally have Andrew Luck for this matchup, which they haven't had each of the last 2 years. But I still think the Steelers have too much firepower. The Steelers roll to a 7-2 record with an impressive win in Indianapolis in Week 10. In Week 11, the Steelers have a short turnaround as they host the Tennessee Titans, a pretty surprising team, don't you think?
Yeah, Tennessee was one of the most underrated teams last year, in my opinion. Had Mariota not gotten hurt last year, I think they kicked the Texans out of their playoff spot. I actually had them going to the playoffs last year until Mariota went down. So they just have a lot to look forward to and look like the next upcoming team full of young players. That being said, I think the Steelers take a loss here. This is also one of the teams that I feel as though the Steelers struggle against all the time, regardless of how good or bad they are. I really think this team looks pretty good this year, so I think the Steelers take a loss here. What do you think?
I was very tempted to do that too, but I think the key difference here is that it's a Thursday night game, and it's usually very hard to win a game on the road on Thursday nights. But I still think this has the potential to be a surprisingly good game, even for a Thursday night game. The Titans, as you mentioned, were a pretty competitive bunch last year that nearly shocked a couple of teams. I like what they have going for them, and I think they're going to make the fans in Pittsburgh nervous on this Thursday night game. But I think the Steelers are going to pull away late in the fourth with a key turnover or sack, and I think they're going to end up winning by a couple of scores, but the final score will not reflect how close the game actually was. But the Steelers improved to 8-2 with a big matchup, actually a Super Bowl rematch in Week 12.
Yeah, this should be a good one on prime time. It's one of the games I'm most excited for because I think two good teams are going to be coming into this game. So in the offseason, the Packers got even better, in my opinion, picking up Martellus Bennett and then drafting cornerback Kevin King in the beginning of the second round because they traded out of the first. So I think the Steelers take a loss, a very close one, to a Super Bowl caliber team, and it could be a showing for the Super Bowl later on in the season. What do you think?
This could be the game of the year for the Steelers, a potential Super Bowl preview. These two teams have two of the NFL's best offenses and best all-around quarterbacks. And while I think the Steelers should be favored in this game because they're more complete and they are at home, I just don't see the Steelers going to 9-2, as strange as that sounds. With a great quarterback on the other side in Aaron Rodgers, I wouldn't be surprised if he finds a way to steal a game for the Packers. I think he sets up a late Mason Crosby field goal, and the Steelers are stunned as they fall to 8-3 in this primetime matchup. Next week, the Steelers look to rebound as they travel to Cincinnati for a Monday night matchup in Cincinnati against the Bengals.
Yeah, Monday Night Football against Cincy, a.k.a. a blessing. Cincy sucks in any primetime game, so without any real analysis, the Steelers walk away with a win here, sweeping Cincy for the second year in a row. It's just a win. I don't really want to feel like I need to say anything else. What do you think?
I feel the same way, but for a different statistic, the Steelers just don't lose in Cincinnati. The last 12 games they've played in Cincinnati, the Bengals have won twice. And while I think the Bengals are going to be a better team at this point than they were earlier in the season, the Steelers are just too good, and they're going to want a nice rebound effort after losing to the Packers, so I think you got a blowout coming. I have the Steelers improving to 9-3. The next week, the Steelers come back home on another Sunday night game to play the hated Baltimore Ravens one more time.
This was rough because three long weeks in a row leading up to possibly the worst short week to have late in the season is against Baltimore. Obviously, you had Thursday night football followed by Sunday night football followed by Monday night football. So then, of course, after Monday night football is when we get to have to go against Baltimore. It's going to be fighting for the division here. So this is the absolute worst time to have a short week against them, as I said 3 times now. Because of that, I think Baltimore does come away with a win in Pittsburgh, which should just add to the end of season stress. What do you think?
Well, as badly as I want to and think the Steelers could win this game, there's a reason the Steelers almost never sweep the Ravens and vice versa. It's because the Ravens are a good team and they're coached well by John Harbaugh. I think he's going to have this team ready, and I think that they are going to shock the Steelers with a classic Steelers-Ravens finish that ends up, unfortunately, in Baltimore's favor this time. The Steelers are going to have some work to do as they drop to 9-4. But the next week, it doesn't get any easier with, I think you and I can agree, their toughest matchup of the season as they play host to the defending Super Bowl champions, the New England Patriots.
Oh, yeah, easily the hardest game of the year, probably. So the question is, will this finally be the time the Steelers beat the Patriots? Will they finally get a pick on Brady? Well, no and yes. Steelers lose, but I think they finally get an interception off of Brady after 20 straight touchdowns or whatever that disgusting statistic is. against Pittsburgh without an interception thrown. And the Patriots just got better this offseason. While the Steelers improved, they were already behind the Patriots, so they would have had to do a lot more improving. And the Patriots took bigger steps to improve. So I think it's easy to pick a loss here. What do you think?
Let me make an analogy to the NHL and something that's very similar. The Pittsburgh Penguins and Washington Capitals just concluded a 7-game series in which the Penguins won. The Penguins are now all-time 9-1 against the Capitals in 10 career series. So it's interesting to think that the Pittsburgh Penguins kind of have a mental edge over the Capitals, where they're like the big brother and the Capitals are like the little brother. So the way I see it is that until the Capitals actually beat the Penguins, they won't. It's something you have to see to believe. And it's as simple as that for me with the Steelers and the Patriots. The big question, though, is are the Steelers finally going to have all the killer bees on the field against the Patriots? I mean, they've played, 4 times now? 3 or 4 times in the last 2 or 3 years. And they haven't been on the field, whether it's been injuries or suspensions to Bell or Brown or Roethlisberger or Bryant too. It would be nice to see them all on the field. I'm not going to hold my breath for a game this late in the year. I think the Steelers are going to have all 4 of them on the field to have a chance to win this game, but I just don't see the Steelers doing it. Like I said, until they do it, I can't pick them. So I have the Steelers dropping this game too, and dropping to 9-5 on the season, which is pretty concerning with the loss to Baltimore mounting, and they all of a sudden have a battle on their hands to win the division with the last 2 weeks of the season. The Steelers move into their Week 16 matchup as they play on Christmas Day for the 2nd year in a row, but this year they're in Houston playing against the Houston Texans.
Yeah, I think the big question for this game is who's going to be starting for Houston at this point, Tom Savage or Deshaun Watson. I think by this point, my guess is Watson, but regardless of who, I think the Steelers win here no matter what. Even though J.J. Watt will be returning this year, they lost A.J. Boye, who was a key part of their defense, being so good last year, and they're not going to be as locked down as they were. So Pittsburgh gets a win in Houston, especially since Pittsburgh's offensive line is one of the best in the league, so it would be able to hold up against one of the best pass rushes in the league. What do you think?
It's the Watt Showdown. TJ versus JJ in Houston on Christmas Day. Think of all the storylines that are going to be coming in this game. The Texans, I think, are going to pose probably the toughest challenge for the Steelers' offense this season, with a great all-round unit that's going to turn this game into a defensive struggle. Luckily for Pittsburgh, I don't really think it matters who the quarterback is for Houston. The Steelers' offense will stick it out long enough to finally make some adjustments, and they'll pull out a close defensive struggle with both Watt brothers playing well, but I think this is a game where TJ comes up with a big forced fumble that ultimately decides the game. I have the Steelers moving to 10-5 on the doorstep of locking up another division title. The Steelers bookend their season with another matchup against the Cleveland Browns. This time, they play host to Cleveland.
Unlike last year, I don't think the Steelers will be able to rest for this game against Cleveland. I think Baltimore will be right on the Steelers' tail for the division. So the Steelers are going to have to play their starters here, and I think they come away with a win. Having them win the division and heading back to the playoffs for the third straight year. So what do you think?
I suspect the division will be on the line here in Pittsburgh, with the Ravens nipping at the Steelers' tails you just mentioned. Should the Steelers lose, the Ravens are going to be right there to wrap up the division. So I imagine the Steelers are going to be in must-win mode with this game. But shocking to every fan, I think the Browns are actually going to take an early lead, and they're going to use that momentum to take a 14-10 halftime lead, stunning the Steelers and putting the football world on notice for a little bit that maybe they are legit. But the Steelers do what they always do in the second half. They beat the Browns. They show their mettle and storm back to take the lead, and they don't relinquish it, capturing a win and the AFC North Division title for the 3rd time in the last 4 seasons, making the playoffs for the 4th year in a row with a record of 11-5. So now, Austin, we've gone through the entire schedule. Are there any other thoughts you want to relay to me and Steeler Nation about our schedule, or your lock picks, some easy games, some hard games? Just what are you thinking about our schedule?
Firstly, for the people who didn't take tally, I have the Steelers going 11-5 as well, but I could totally see them going 12-4 by beating either the Jaguars or the. I see that those two games I see can be flipped. I think the Steelers have a possibility to beat the Jaguars. The Steelers have a possibility to beat anyone and everyone, but I feel like there's a better chance of the Jaguars Packers. I think for sure the Steelers will be losing to the Patriots, and I think for sure you can guarantee one loss to the Ravens because it like you said, it doesn't happen very often. But I think the game I'm most excited for is probably the Green Bay Packers game, and then behind it is the Kansas City Chiefs game. I enjoy watching the Steelers versus the Chiefs. I mean, the last time we did it was very stressful, as it was only field goals and it was close the entire game. But I feel like it's always a fun game to watch. What do you think? Do you have any other things to add about the games?
Well, like you just said, it's very hard to go 6-0 in a division, and that's why Austin and I both have the Steelers going 5-1 with our losses coming to Baltimore. It's important to remember we've got a good bye week here, and the conference games, losing conference games are pretty important. The one main difference Austin and I had was who the Steelers were going to drop their disappointing game to, because it seems like they always do. You had the Jaguars, Austin, and I had the Vikings. I think you and I both agree, though, it's probably going to happen earlier in the season before the team really gets into sync. But I think overall, when you look at the schedule, you have to be pretty excited. Yes, they're going to have some tough matchups late in the season, so that's going to make it really important for them to start out fast this season, something they did not do last season. But I think that's really all I have to say about it right now, Austin.
I think we could wrap up then.
Alrighty then. We'll be back soon, Steeler Nation. I don't know where we'll go from here, but we can discuss that later, Austin. If you want to check us out on Twitter, follow us at @Stronger_Steel for our news about the Steelers or our episodes. You can do the same on Facebook at Stronger Than Steel Podcast. Check out our episodes at YouTube or SoundCloud under the name Stronger Than Steel Podcast. If you have any questions about the show, email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your feedback or thoughts on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, Steeler Nation, you all have a great night. And Austin, thank you again for joining me. I'm looking forward to doing this again soon.
Bye.
Take care.